Welcome to this very special episode of Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, well, of course, it is Christmas Day here, at least in my time zone, in my part of the world, so Merry Christmas to everyone. If you don't celebrate Christmas, well, happy whatever it happens to be. I'm an atheist myself, but my family celebrates Christmas. I had a bunch of them over here today, and I got to speak with my kids, which doesn't happen as frequently as I'd like. And, we say Merry Christmas regardless of what I may happen to think. I'm one of those guys who's not into political correctness. I'm not one of those guys who's into pandering to atheists who have a chip on their shoulder. Unlike me, I have none. So I say, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Larry. Nice to be speaking with you. So tonight, in addition to it being Christmas, and I don't have anything particularly Christmassy to talk about, we will, of course, have our usual live call-ins via Skype anytime you pretty much want. I will have the current weekly Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics where I live. We will talk about the various virus relief packages that have been in front of Congress and at the president's desk. We will talk about some election quote-unquote experts whom I've now watched that are utter charlatans. I also have something to talk about with respect to some videos that a couple of my viewers sent to me. I will have a review, of yesterday's Star Trek Discovery episode, Season 3, Episode 11, Don't Care What the Name Is. And I will also do a bit of review of The Mandalorian season finale, just because it stands in incredibly stark contrast to Star Trek Discovery. So this is a live stream, so even if I'm not able to get to you via Skype, you're free to talk to me about anything that you want in chat. You can talk to me basically about anything, whether it is political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention, and boy did I find out last week that I can't mention that name, without risking this channel's video or the channel itself or the stream being stopped midstream, which happened last week. I can talk about that virus. I can talk about the United States Civil War II, which we seem to be still on the track for. We can also talk about things relating to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am, of course, happy to answer everything in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some subjects that I won't discuss because it's personal, but anything else, pretty much fair game. I'll get to as many of my viewers as I can with the understanding that I'm not sure how long this stream will go. Oftentimes I'll cap it at 3 hours. Today, however, kind of screwed up my back already. I'm sitting in such a way and with a pillow behind me that's going to help, but I don't know how long that'll last. What's my pin? Yes, see, I actually have two pins. One is a cow pin, which is the logo of Jesse Milestone from Mindless Entertainment. One of the very first few people when I was doing science fiction and stuff on this who showed any real interest. She's now way much bigger than I am and probably basically always was. But she sent me a pin. What happened was I called into one of her live streams one time, and I paid to do it. She was saying, okay, I'll Skype anybody. She's done it the same way I'm doing it, which I'll talk about in a second. But she said, I paid $15 because I wanted to talk about some specific thing. It was my experience seeing Star Wars for the first time in a Cinerama theater. Anyway, as a result of that, I got this button, as well as an autographed picture of Jesse Milestone, which has some green in it, apparently, so it's going to screw up. But she sent me an autographed picture. The other one that I have is a dual flag. One is the U.S. flag, and then right next to it, and you can't see it very well, is a Gadsden flag, the one with the snake on it that says, "Don't tread on me." You remember the call to Jesse? Oh, do you? You were listening at that time. Cool. Well, hey, it happens. I can't post that video. I had that video taken out as a clip, and it used to be on this channel back when I had the first channel. Unfortunately, any video from the 200 some or so plus that were deleted for utterly frivolous reasons when they killed my channel, I cannot upload. YouTube's algorithms are so good that they can tell when you're uploading a video from something that had been shut down. Go figure. But anyway, if you would like to call in to me, as I did with Jesse all those many eons ago, you can call in via Skype. Since I don't want to give out all of my Skype information in public, I want to handle it this way. If you're interested in talking with me directly, send me an email to callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I'll Skype you back. And you'll be free to talk about anything that you want to. Disagree with me, agree, doesn't matter. I'll talk about anything. So again, if you're interested in being on the show, email me at callin@sylranch.tv. Give me your Skype information, and I'll Skype you back. That email address again is callin@sylranch.tv. So as we wait for a few more people to pop in, it looks like I got about 4 or 5 right now. I will go through and answer the question that nobody asked. What are the this week's current virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? Now, as always, nice backdrop. Thank you. Stole it from somebody who put it on YouTube for public use. This is all CGI. To me, I could sort of tell with the snow, but somebody did a really great 2.5-hour CGI video. I've got it so that it loops, but I'd be shocked if I go past 2.5 hours in any given card that I go to. Anyway, as always, I do like to source everything that I get information on. There's a great website that I have linked to in my description box where you can find out all kinds of statistical information about Nebraska and our virus statistics. The only thing I would suggest is it doesn't default to the total number of deaths. I would change to the total number of deaths because that'll tell you more about the story as a whole. If you only look at just the last 14 days, which is what I think it defaults to, you're going to get a skewed picture of things. You can have like a 50% increase, 100% increase in the number of deaths over 2 days. Well, yeah, because you're counting one death and then another one, 100%. If you're looking at the entire total, it gives you a much better picture of what the entire thing looks like. So, as we discovered last week, Lancaster County's current population is in the vicinity of 323,826. We have so far performed 132,215 tests, which is up from last week. But again, that's not exactly a meaningful number since it's not a percentage of the population. It means that if you have one test and if it comes back positive, you may have another test just to check and make sure that they haven't gotten a false positive. Or even sometimes if you get one that might be questionable, they might test you again. Total number of Lancaster County positive tests is 21,397, which is up about 1,257 from last week. This is the sixth or seventh increase in a row. It's gone on for a couple of months now. Probably tends to correspond to the additional testing we're doing, the weather, and that's getting nasty. Finally had to go and do some snow shoveling. Of course, it was 8 degrees last night, and then it got up above 32 Fahrenheit. So we're seeing it all disappear. That happens a lot of times here. The weather's really variable. Total number of Lancaster County deaths is 122, which is up 9 from last week, which again probably corresponds to the number of additional positive tests. But this does represent a continuing dip in terms of how many deaths there are. We had deaths going up, and then deaths are starting to go down right now. Deaths as a percentage of the total tested is 0.922%, which is up 0.119% from last week. It's about statistically identical. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases is 0.502%, which is up 0.0092 from last week, statistically identical. It represents the smallest uptick in weeks, which is a good thing. Always mentioned before the weather got nasty, we had been in the general vicinity of 0.3%, infection positive test to deaths ratio. I'm happier with the 0.3, obviously. Not thrilled that it's gone up past 0.5%, but again, you're still talking about something that is less than just barely over 0.5%. Deaths as a percentage of the population itself is 0.0377%, which is up 0.0028% from last week, statistically identical. And again, it is a very small uptick from last week, and regardless, it's statistically insignificant in terms of how it might affect our lives here. Hey, Dalton, nice to see you tonight. Yeah, tests, one positive, one negative, lose 300. Yeah, and that's the thing. We don't know for sure what they're counting as virus deaths. We just don't know. We don't know how that's done. I wish I did know in my state, but I don't. I haven't the slightest clue. If somebody like I have a close relative who is immunocompromised, if they got this, or any upper respiratory infection, there is a serious danger that they would get pneumonia. Now, they'd probably pass away from the pneumonia, but if they got that as a result of getting this virus, then it would be counted as a virus thing, even though the fact that, they could get any kind of upper respiratory infection, a bad cold, a bad flu, that could turn south on them. So we just don't know for sure how those things are actually done. Yeah, cold and flu are cured. Yes, Merry Christmas, Dalton. And again, nice to see you here. Nice to see everybody here tonight. My audience is awesome, as always. So to talk a little bit about the virus relief bills that have been going on, the first one was frickin' ridiculous. I mean, to begin with, they're crowing about how they're going to give everybody $600 whole dollars. Well, where I live, in my market, you might be able to pay for 1 month's rent if you had like a 1-bedroom apartment, right? Studio, probably. I mean, there's no doubt lots and lots of students of the 30,000 that are at the University of Nebraska who would be thrilled with that because, they're living in cheap housing anyway and probably with 2 roommates, and so that's a significant amount of money. Otherwise, in my market, it's maybe a month if you're in a 1-bedroom apartment. If you got anything larger than that, it's just almost meaningless. And that bill was filled from top to bottom. And you're right, Larry, it was pork partly, but it wasn't entirely pork. Oh my God, I had my own senator, I've forgotten her name now, Deb Fisher, Senator Deb Fisher, Nebraska, tweeted out how thrilled she was that relief bill had in it some stuff that she wanted for airlines. I mean, it wasn't just overseas stuff. That thing, essentially what they did was they said, okay, we're going to pass this thing. Throw in whatever your favorite thing that you haven't been able to get through is. We'll just do it. And the thing was thousands of pages long, and they only had a couple of hours to read it. Frankly, anybody who voted for that bill should be taken out back, the snot beaten out of them. I mean, you got a bill like that, you should just automatically, it doesn't matter whether a little tiny piece of it has your stupid thing about airlines in it. You look at it and you just go, no, I have no idea what's in this thing. I'm not going to vote for it. And fortunately enough, President Trump did the right thing in vetoing the thing. Well, now, we have seen some, jiggery-pokery behind the, scenes and whatnot, and it looks like they're probably going to get to a bill to President Trump's desk for about $2,000, maybe more. It's changing every microsecond near as I can tell. Whether it's got a ton of pork in it, who knows? I have yet to actually see the bill. There's a senator out there who's crowing about how this is a standalone bill and doesn't contain anything else in it. But I don't believe a politician for a picosecond. I want to see the bill, read it, and see if I can get through the legalese enough so that I can see, okay, what is actually in this stupid bill. This, forget it. I'd have to be an attorney, and it would take me days, maybe weeks. It should never have been passed by either house. And certainly President Trump did the right thing on vetoing that thing. Now on this next one, who knows? We'll never know. I want to see the actual bill. I do not trust. Oh, by the way, Deb Fisher that I talked about, Senator Deb Fisher, gets which letter she has behind her name. That would be an R. All of them do. Both of my senators and my congressmen have an R behind their names. But my senators were thrilled that their pork was in it. Let's see, pork for other countries. Bus passenger transportation is dying. No help from anywhere. Yeah. 6,000 pages long. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was utterly ridiculous. And of course, that's 6,000 pages worth of legalese. 90% of the time when they're writing big-ass bills like this, what they're doing they aren't setting out, okay, this is a brand new law. What they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to take this existing law that's already on the Federal Register. We're going to take out this paragraph. We're going to throw it away. We're going to put in this new paragraph. We're going to amend some lines so that instead of reading a certain way, they read another way. And in order to follow it, you got to almost be an attorney yourself, because you're looking at this going, okay, well, which freaking thing is that? Okay, so you're going to change this to this. And 6,000 pages of that insanity. 6,000 pages of that crazy. Should never have been even passed by either house. And frankly, if you have a representative or a congressman who voted for that thing, it's time to get rid of them, guys. And that includes you, Senator Deb Fischer, and Senator Ben Sass, and Congressman John Fortenberry of Nebraska. You voted for it. You need to be out. Let's see. Yeah, 6,000 pages, Marshall says. Nice to see you here tonight, Marshall. Thank you for coming in. Everybody, as always, thank you for coming in on Christmas Eve. I had some stuff going on last night with family that kind of prevented me. But they were a good chunk of them here, a good chunk of the day. But, of course, they all went into, comatose turkey-induced comas and are, sleeping off someplace. I'm the only one crazy enough to come up and do this. But appreciate anybody coming in on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, rather. That's awesome of you. But, yeah, 5,900 of which were expensive and useless. Yeah, as I was mentioning, my own one of my own senators was just so thrilled that her bit of pork about airlines got in. Yeah. Anyway, they got another one, and I'd like to see the bill, because I don't trust it when any senator or representative tells me that it's a standalone bill. I wonder what that really means, because, of course, when their mouths are moving, they're lying. Let's take a look at it. Maybe, maybe not. The interesting thing about this is, by the way, that this has gotten the Republicans, whether it be Republicans on the ground or Republican Congress people, to become socialists. Because let us be real, that is what it is. It is a transfer of wealth from those who have to those who have not. Or in this case, frankly, just more kiting of checks. My solution for this all along, since this started at the beginning of the year, and it started tanking the economy and turning things into what looks like a freaking Great Depression, was simply this. And I tried, my interesting story, my congressman, Jeff Fortenberry, he used to include me because they had a list of things where he'd do online town hall meetings that were essentially him phoning you up. He had my number and some auto dialer. He'd phone me up, and you could listen to him gibber on for a while. Sometime he'd have a doctor from University of Nebraska Omaha Medical Center, which is a well-respected medical center. It's where they sent some of the first virus patients. And he would gibber, and at one point, they were talking about bailouts and stuff, and they allow you to ask questions. So I said, why don't you just put a complete moratorium on all federal taxation at every level, whether it's individual or corporate, for the next 5 years? Let them get back all the money that they paid in for this year, and not charge them for the next 5 years. Guess what happened? I got hung up on. But apparently Congressman Jeff Fortenberry did not like that question. But it would be a better way of doing things. It wouldn't require transferring wealth from those who have not. It doesn't require turning a Republican into a socialist, which is what it is. It would work. It would work, and it doesn't matter whether or not you'd have a budget shortfall. These nitwits have been kiting checks my entire life, and they're not going to stop, even if they have, even if they'll never get to a balanced budget. They will never pay off the public debt. You might as well let them kite checks. My father had, interestingly enough, before he passed away, had noted, I thought long ago that this whole house of cards would have come crashing down. There is no way to pay off the public debt. It is unserviceable. It will never be paid off. Ever, 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 ever. And anytime we have indebted ourselves more than any country in the entirety of human history, I think you could truthfully say that if you added up the debt ever incurred by every country in the world throughout human history, it would not equal what we have done. at some point, this has got to come down and fall apart, right? I mean, other countries are going to say, eventually look at this and go, there's no way these guys are ever going to be able to pay this back. And when they lose faith in the U.S. dollar, we're screwed. But my father noted a number of years ago before he passed away that what we've gotten into with these multi-trillion-dollar debts is imaginary numbers. Now, it isn't to say that the numbers don't exist, that they're not real, that they don't have a tangible asset. It's that you can't comprehend them. What is a trillion? I mean, what is a trillion? What can you look at and say that's a trillion of something? You can't. It is purely imaginary. You can't even imagine what that much money looks like. It's not possible. And so perhaps the fact that it's imaginary and the fact that the world hasn't yet caught on because they are imaginary numbers means that they can go on forever. I don't know. I expected 20 years ago that it would have to fall apart of its own accord, and now we have multiple orders of magnitude in terms of debt that we will never, ever pay off. But we've successfully returned Republicans both on the ground and at the federal level, and certainly at the state and local level, into outright socialists. Because if you're in favor of a bailout, if you're in favor of transferring money from people that have it to people that don't, or just plain kiting checks to get it done, you're a socialist. Check my things here. Marshall says going to start a data security company called Less Idiotic Than the Ones Politicians Contract with Data and Network Security, Inc. I'm going to talk about that, yeah. Freedom of speech, myth. Oh, man. Like I say, last week, in the middle of my stream, when I was talking specifically naming that unspecified virus of unknown origin, it halted me midstream when I started talking about it. And then yesterday or something, I put in some additional ad copy today about some of the additional stuff I was going to talk about, which includes, Marshall's got this because he put me onto it last night. It's a damn rabbit hole. Thanks, Marshall. But he put me onto this video last night that was just utterly idiotic. So I ended up adding that in. The words, I hope I can say this without tripping some tripwire YouTube ads. I could not put the words voting machine and the word that has to do with what if somebody did something that might undermine an election. I couldn't put those two things in the same tweet. If I put them together as one thing that was easy to read, Twitter would not allow me to post it. I had to break them out into two different words. That's where we're at. That is where we're at. I was rather surprised by that because up until that point, until I did yesterday's ad copy, I was able to do that. But no, Twitter will not let you put certain words together that they believe to be unfounded. They will not let you put it together. Yeah, Larry says even a billion is incomprehensible. Yeah, and Marshall says, love baiting me. Yeah, well, it's how easy it is on some topics. But yeah, it's incomprehensible. About 10 years ago when I was teaching, I sat down and I decided that I was going to attempt to model the public debt using Minecraft and gold cubes. I worked out, okay, here's how much money would go into gold brick at that time, bar of gold, figure out what the volume of that is compared to a 1, cubic meter of gold, and then start building it. I kept crashing the game. I could not put enough in. Even what I had, if you know Minecraft, started at the bedrock of the map and extended up to the altitude ceiling. And if you stood on the corner where I sort of had part of it done, you just saw endless gold stretching off into infinity on either corner. It was astonishing. And even if I had been able to model it, I'm not sure it would have mattered because, again, it's just a giant solid brick, item. I mean, it's not that meaningful. You can't comprehend what those freaking numbers are. So, that's where I am with the virus relief bill. I'll tell you, I don't have anything in the way of prepared remarks tonight. It's been too busy, with family and everything. I have a lot of them around here. So I have, but I have a number of things I can do off the top of my head. One of those things I can do off the top of my head, as I often do to break things up a little bit. Marshall, I will get back to that other stuff. Oh, gosh. I see excellent connection, but all of a sudden my analytics went to hell. Pardon me while I check my secondary monitor to see if I'm actually going through. Yes, I am. Okay. One of the things I can do, but in terms of breaking this up, is I can briefly talk about my review of Star Trek. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Star Trek Season 3, Episode 11, whose name I don't care about, because this was the most stultifyingly boring episode we've seen so far. This was boring. Great visuals going on here. You can't say more money than God won't give you great visuals. But it was boring. I almost wish I'd done an actual reaction video, because I don't make a good reactor. They wear their hearts on their sleeves. But this time, might have worked, because I'm going, I 3 separate times when they go, oh, okay, we found this place, we got to go. And then Stamets has that heartfelt, tear-jerking scene with Culber about how Culber shouldn't go. I'm like, why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing this at all? I mean, have we not a million times in the past seen where loved ones go on, dangerous missions? Apparently, Stamets has never gotten the memo, okay? Space exploration is inherently dangerous, okay? When you have a loved one that's in that, you gotta know that there's some risk that they could be croaking anytime. So that was stupid. And then there were 2 other scenes, and I only remember the one with Tilly and Burnham. But they're going on about, oh, Tilly, you belong in the center seat, and do all this, and it's tearful, and it's the usual tears and hugging, and all 3 of those, my reaction literally was, I'm watching it on my phone, and I'm going, oh God, not again. This is 3 of them. 3 of them. I can't believe 3 of these stupid conversations that you would never hear in any other series in the franchise. Not because they couldn't do it, they could write that crap anytime that they wanted to, but because they knew it was stupid. You are in a dangerous field. You get put in the center seat, although that's stupid. Why would you put an ensign as your executive officer? It makes no sense. But even if you do, if your ensign winds up in the center seat, you go, okay, well, I'm going to do the best. I'm Starfleet. I will do the damn best I can. Keep a poker face and deal with it as I can. You don't need to have a stupid, friggin' tearful, hugging scene between these 2 characters that I really don't care about anymore, or ever did, for that matter. So it was just dumb. It was, it's awful. Awful. My disco reaction, yes. Bill asleep on couch, disco on monitor. No, it wasn't asleep. I was just laying in bed with my phone going, I sat there, I said out loud, oh, can we please get on with it? 3 times. Then we get to the source of the burn, which is something we've been leading up to all season. The source of the burn turns out to be apparently the most powerful being in the galaxy, who is a social misfit who causes the burn whenever he gets triggered. Damn good thing he didn't get triggered any time in the last 100 years, and interesting that he didn't get triggered, considering what was going on there. I was frankly amazed that they made someone other than Michael Burnham the most powerful creature around. I suppose that just means that next week, or the week after or something, when they resolve this crap, then they're going to have it turn out that she was, of course, because she's the most important thing in all the universe, she would have been key to fixing it all. But that episode is just so boring. We just went from one boring set piece to another. I don't know what writer thought this was any damn good, because to me it just felt like, okay, we're going from this boring set piece to this boring set piece to this boring set piece. This is the most boring episode of this stupid show to date, and that's going some. The actual content of this episode, that if you're out there, fan editor who can stand to watch this thing, this is, there have been several episodes where you could just virtually get rid of them except for a line or two. This one, just, like 10 minutes tops worth of useful content in it. Star Siege player. I heard about Ensign being put in charge of the ship. That must be an insult to every non-ensign officer on the ship. Yeah, she was made the executive officer fairly early on this season, and you're just like, what? What? An ensign? The problem is when it comes to stuff like that, right? These dimwits running the show have no conception of what the military is about, right? They have no idea. The difference between they and the people who are creating Star Trek the original series is Star Trek the original series people had almost all served in World War II. They understood a command structure. They understood that an ensign is the lowest officer, and if they end up being in the center seat in these circumstances, it probably means that everybody above them is dead. There are so many bridge officers who would be much more qualified. Putting her in charge is stupid. Admittedly, as written, she did a decent job of it, but it's still stupid. It's just stupid. They don't know that an ensign is the lowest. They don't know that there's, lieutenant, junior grade, lieutenant commander, commander, captain. They don't know any of this command structure, so they don't know that there's going to be a ton of people on that ship with far more experience than Tilly. That's just dumb. Starseed player, is this being Q? No, it's not Q, but it's capable of destroying, causing dilithium to go inert anytime it gets triggered. When it becomes emotionally upset to a certain point, boom. They almost caused another one in this episode. That makes no damn sense. The deal is it is an alien that has been stuck on this ship or something for the last 100 years. It caused a burn in the first place, and somehow, over the last 100 years, it has not gotten emotionally upset enough to do another burn until it almost did one this time. That doesn't make any damn sense. Just no damn sense at all. Expanse is very good sci-fi series. Yes, Larry. I have been getting into, I'm getting into season 5 now. Great, as always. Awesome show. Marcia says, I'm honestly happy that Doug's face, actually got to be shown, but that isn't a good plot point. They got into a situation where I'm not quite sure what happened. My theory is that they beamed onto this giant holodeck, which I don't really have a problem with, 1,000 years in the future. That's fine. But in so doing, they altered the race of all three of the landing party. And in this case, the actor who plays Sorrow, actually, they took him out. They made him a human. I always have a problem when you take an actor and you stick them 100% inside of prosthetics. He is a good actor. If he wasn't, he would not be able to be emotive in any way. He's very good at his body language, very, very good. But it is nice to see his face. It's nice to. It's the difference between, they made a mistake, frankly, in Next Generation when they gave Geordi that visor. The thing is that the actor who plays him, blanking on his name now, has extremely expressive eyes. That's one of the major ways that he gets his emotion across, is he has extremely expressive eyes. LeVar Burton. Very, very expressive eyes. In the movies, they changed that thing to be, some kind of implants. Perfect. They should have done that from day one. Just give the guy some, contact lenses, because he's so emotive with his eyes. The difference between what you see in the movies and what you can see on Next Gen is night and day. They should never have given them that visor. It crippled him. And the same thing is true whenever you get, an actor that's completely covered with makeup. We saw it with the Kling orcs in the first season, totally covered and unable to really emote through it. And then they were speaking Klingon the entire time, so you were reading the subtitles while they're speaking Klingon. There's massive appliances all over their heads. That's why I've never really been a fan of any of the Klingon makeup past the original series. Those actors in the original series were able to give a performance because they could use their face. When you stick a prosthesis on this part of their head and put something in their mouths, it makes it far more difficult. And they largely resorted to just growling. Klingons, if you look at Commander Kor, the first Klingon we ever saw, very menacing, very nasty looking. He could calmly tell you about how he was going to destroy your mind, and you totally believed it because amazing performance. Years and years later, they gave him a much different character, same name, but you stuck him inside all of this prosthesis, and all he had was his voice and his eyes, basically. I'm never a fan of that, and certainly, with Doug, he's crippled. He's crippled. Fortunately, he is an extraordinarily good actor, but it was nice to see that. Yeah, Doug Jones. I'm sorry, I'm misremembering his name. Andreas Kasoulis, yes, did incredibly well as Jakar in Babylon 5 with full facial prosthetics, and only his eyes were visible. You want to know the really interesting thing about that? Because I noticed it in the last episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. He had a recurring role on Next Gen of Commander Tomalak, a Romulan. And for that, he had a prosthesis up on his forehead, like they tended to do in Next Gen and Berman-era Star Trek. It was an overused trope. They should have gotten more creative with it. But he had this thing on his forehead. When he first started doing that role in Next Gen, he had a much more subdued performance. What happened was then he got his roles regular on Babylon 5 as Jakar, and then his whole face is covered. And he was good at what he did. He was a little bigger in terms of what he did with his face, because you have to be in order to get through all this. Fast forward to the last episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, the character makes an appearance in there, basically kind of a cameo. Much bigger performance out of him, because at that time he was used to all of this. And when they went back to just this, and he didn't have to, fight through all the makeup and act through all the makeup, it was a much bigger performance. And I noticed it immediately. I said, oh, okay, there's a guy who has just gotten used to 5 years or so. I've forgotten where they were at Babylon 5 at that point. He's gotten used to years of having to work through this prosthesis. And so it was a little too large. It was a little too big for the character when they got back to it in Next Gen. But yeah, nice that he was he was in it. Nice that he was in it, but the plot device of getting them there was weird, just weird. Forehead only is much cheaper and faster than full face. Oh yeah, absolutely. I just mean in terms of using forehead appliances. Star Trek started, because they'd been successful in doing it with the Klingons, they started doing it with every single alien. They had a nose, they had foreheads, they had, that was so overused in Berman-era Star Trek. They should have done something else. I don't know what necessarily off the top of my head that you would do, but constantly just changing the forehead, it got to be too much. It got to be where it wasn't really all creative anymore. You can get away with Spock, bare pointed ears. That's all you needed. But anyway, this was an incredibly boring episode that sets up something that doesn't make any sense. Oh, and at the end, spoiler alert if you haven't figured it out already. I'm talking about the episode. Spoiler alert. The ship is taken over by some Andorian captain we've seen once, I think, before in the show. If you know the pitch meeting, right? If you know, I think it's Ryan George's pitch meetings, which are fantastic. Go watch all the pitch meetings that you can, and then for kicks, watch people reacting to them. What he does is basically walk through as if he's a writer pitching to a producer, and he'll say, he'll mention plot points, and the producer will ask him stuff. So here we are, right? These people are taking over the ship. Now, you remember they've all got comm badges now that are personal transporters, right? So I'm thinking to myself, here I am. Yeah, so the aliens, they decide to take over the ship. Oh, that must be difficult considering everybody has a portable transporter that they can use to transport anywhere they want to. Actually, it's going to be super easy. Barely an inconvenience. That's kind of what it was for me. It's like, wait. Personal transporters that'll take you anywhere. Yeah, they were taking them away from people, but they couldn't take them away from everybody. I'd have to beam over 100, 150 people, however many, to personally take one off of everybody. If it's me and I'm watching and I'm saying, oh shit, they're taking everybody out of engineering. I'm in the armory now. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. There's a number of plot points like that in this episode. Marshall says, and we said that if you took the mask off, Andreas would upstage everyone on the cast more than he did anyway. Yeah. It's Marshall, by the way, was involved in some of the behind-the-scenes stuff at Babylon 5. Learned a lot about stuff that happened there by listening to him. But, by the way, there's somebody, one of my favorite reactors, is now watching Babylon 5. She doesn't know that I have a whole bunch of notes prepped, because I don't want to spoil it for her, because if you haven't watched Babylon 5, it's key that you not be spoiled. It is absolutely a necessity that you not get spoiled. So I have a whole bunch of notes, some of which are based on things that Marshall have said to me. When she gets to certain episodes, like when she ends the first season, going to be a whole string of stuff about what happened between the first and second season. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it for you. Great show. Babylon 5 was a great show. Certainly watch it if you get the time. Watch every episode in order. There is a 5-year arc involved that you will not get the end of until you get to the end. So you need to watch everything. Why wouldn't the super smart disco computers just beam the bad guys into the brig? Well, because they needed to be, so the plot can happen. So the episode can go forth. Oh, what? My whole reaction to this stupid episode. Just, terrible. Boring, stupid, terrible, super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Anyway, that's all I want to talk about Star Trek Discovery, because it was dumb. Don't watch it as usual. Not worth paying for. Thank God I don't. DuckDuckGo.com. Lots of ad blockers installed. Watch, space, quote, space, Star Trek, Discovery, quote, space, online, space, free. Okay. So, something that I watched, besides The Expanse, something that I watched that was good. I might, but I can't look away from Discovery. I just can't. I've been with this franchise since 1967. I can no longer look away from the damn train wreck. Wish I could. I may get to a point where I can do an Expanse. The thing is, I'm still episodes behind on that. It's been a week. I was planning to be farther along with it than I am, but other things kind of got in the way. Particularly Christmas and relatives being around and stuff like that. That's why I don't have prepared remarks tonight. But if this particular episode, if I was going to give it a rating from 1 to 5, with 1 being existentially, threateningly bad, which is that you can die if you watch it, to 5, which is passable, this one gets a 1.2. That's because I'm not going to die if I watch it. Insulting to my intelligence? Yes. Stupid all the way around? Yes. Is it actually super easy? Barely an inconvenience on many occasions? Yes. Is it boring? Yes. Would you die? No. But you still shouldn't watch it. But something you should watch. Oh my God. The Mandalorian. That's been a good show all the way around. But this week they did something that I'm going to have to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. Why won't the show self-destruct and go away? Well, the reason that they, this is my honest to God opinion on this. It's remained true for years now. The reason that they can't do anything that would make their Star Trek property appear to be in some way not profitable is because their entire streaming service, CBS All Access and soon to be Paramount Plus, totally relies on the Star Trek property. Without it, there is nothing on that streaming service worth paying for. Nothing. And so if that property is seen to fail, so will their service, and this will have severe negative repercussions financially to CBS. Really severe. Pretty bad when the primary plot point for an entire season is temper tantrum. Yeah. Temper tantrum that you would think that this particular individual, given its background, would have had multiple ones. I mean, like every 15 minutes, there would be a burn. It's just dumb. Anyhow, getting into something was good. That was very, very good. If you've not seen The Expanse, The Mandalorian, the season finale. Go watch it. Go watch all of the series. It's great. Just mute me if you don't want to get spoilers. Mute me until this lower third goes away and it goes back to my kind of standard one, because I'm going to spoil it. Because there's a giant spoiler at the end. I mean, it's a good episode all the way through. They generally have been. And I've heard a lot of people complaining about The Mandalorian, it being, kind of formulaic. And yeah, it has kind of had a formula to it. But the end of this one was awesome. Because they brought back Luke Skywalker as a young man. Because this series takes place between the fall of the Republic and, Star Wars Episode 7. So it takes place in between that, at a time when Luke would have been recruiting more Jedi and a much younger man, obviously. And it was, in fact, Mark Hamill with a lot of de-aging and him doing his own voice. People have complained that the face on Luke doesn't look quite right. Well, the deal is this. They did some kind of deep fake thingy where they were using more of his face as it came from Star Wars Episode 4 as opposed to later. And the reason that his face changed dramatically was between Episode 4 and Episode 5, Mark Hamill was in a very bad car accident, screwed up his face, and you can see it. You can see that there was a change in his face. He gets some crags and lines in his face in later episodes that he didn't have previously. You can really see this in action if you can stand the Star Wars Holiday Special. Hey, I'll put a link to that below when I'm done, because there's a very good copy, a nice 1080p copy of a VHS rip here on YouTube. If you can stand to watch it, there is one scene with Luke, and it happened after his accident, but before he'd really had time to recover from it, before he'd done the healing. Unfortunately, he was contractually bound to be in this stupid piece of crap. I do recommend, if you're going to watch the entirety of the Star Wars Holiday Special, that you not be in a legal frame of mind. I think a big bag of weed is definitely in order. I think they were probably dropping acid when they made this thing. But in any case, what they did with Luke, unfortunately, is two things. They just slattered on a ton of makeup and then put a wig on him that was so bad that if you know what was going on in the background, you just knew. We're covering scars. We're covering where he's got stuff that's still healing. And then they put him behind a smoke machine. And there's a scene in there where, when he's trying to smile, and it's just creepy as all hell, because the poor guy just couldn't do it. His face was all messed up. So, between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens is when this happens, and closer to Return of the Jedi than Force Awakens. Luke is still a young man, and that's why the reason they did the face they did is I think they got more of the face off of Episode 4. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because this was the Luke Skywalker that everybody of my age wanted to see. We did not want to see Luke Skywalker self-imposed for a stupid reason for something that should never have happened, and then turning into an old hermit that squeezes blue milk out of a giant sea cow and drinks it warm out of the thing. Hated it. Everybody, there's so many things that they did wrong with that sequel trilogy. The main ones were how they treated the original trilogy cast, and the biggest one was Luke Skywalker. Anybody my age, right? As we aged, as I aged, and I thought, how would Luke, if he was aging along with me, because they're not that far off in age, he's a bit older than I am. But what if Luke and I aged at about the same time? Here I am in IT, start out, pretty low end of the things, as I get better and I get better and I get better and I get better, and I get to a point where I can say to myself, and not really bragging, but I'm pretty damn good at it, right? And that's what I wanted to see Luke do. And that's what everybody wanted to see Luke do. They wanted to see Luke turn into Obi-Wan Kenobi at an old age. The wise Jedi master. And they just completely assassinated that character. Same thing with Han and Leia. They were a couple that should never have been split up. Never, ever have been split up. My personal, internally, as I was saying, okay, what happens as she grows up as I do, was that she would become some kind of elder statesman. With the Republic. And what about Han? Well, he's going to get too old to do all this stuff, and he's going to be stuck with her anyway. He'd probably turn into somebody like Lando, who's a successful businessman. Give him a fleet of ships that he deals with. If I was going to kick off, episode, Force Awakens in a different way, I would have it be that here we find them on Coruscant, right? And he runs this big thing of shipping. And he keeps getting hit by pirates in the Outer Rim. So he takes the Millennium Falcon out there on his own to find out what the hell's going on. And from there, we can kick off the rest of the story. That's what I would have done. We wanted to see these characters age gracefully. We wanted to see Han and Leia forever, living happily ever after. And they assassinated all of those characters. Well, this was the Luke Skywalker that we always wanted to see. A Jedi Master who walks in and completely annihilates all of the bad guys in front of him. And then he's like, I'm here. I'm going to take Grogu. I will give my life to, protect this kid, and he's going to become a Jedi. That was the Luke we always wanted to see. There were so many reactors. I watched a lot of reactors, and there are now what they call mashups, where they take a whole bunch of reactors for a single scene, and they put them all picture-in-picture inside of a thing, and you can watch them react. They're all the same. A lot of them, men included, are moved to tears because this was the Luke Skywalker we always wanted to see. Not this crap that Jar Jar Abrams gave us, and certainly not the crap that Ruin Johnson gave us. We wanted to see the wise Jedi Master, and finally we did. After all these years, we finally saw him. And it made you just go, man, Jon Favreau, he gets this. Jon Favreau should be put in charge of Lucasfilm. You should kick Kathleen Kennedy out. The man gets this. He gets what we wanted to see. And he gets how they fracked it up. And he gets how ticked off we all became because we didn't see it. And it would have been easy to do. You wouldn't have had to have done what they did with them. It would have been easy. So many things. It is if you're not a hack fraud like Jar Jar Abrams or Ruin Johnson. But this was the Luke Skywalker we all wanted to see. I tell you honestly, when I saw it, I was moved to tears. And there's a lot of people out there who will say, oh, God, a bunch of fanboys, you sissies. Like, no. 2 words, assholes. Old Yeller. If you don't know what Old Yeller is, go watch it. It is a movie that is absolutely famous for causing men to come to tears. This was my Luke Skywalker. This is the Luke Skywalker that I imagined as I got older. 20, 30 years ago, this would have been Luke Skywalker. The guy who is coming into his own as the Jedi, and it's perfect. It was freaking perfect. Jon Favreau, giant round of applause. You awesome, awesome individual. Disney, why does Kathleen Kennedy still have a job? You clearly have someone who understands this source material. And let me tell you, there's a great quote recently by Neil Gaiman, who's a writer and has done a lot of different things. He said, let me see if I can get the quote right. The source material that fans love is the source material that fans love. If you vary from that source material, you risk alienating the fans on a monumental level. Batman isn't Batman anymore if he's a reporter in a yellow trench coat with a pet bat. That's what you schmucks have done, okay? You've fracked up the source material so badly that it has pissed all of us off. And finally seeing Luke, the Luke Skywalker that we always wanted to see, that was awesome. Very, very cathartic. It was script-wise, it was a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina. But still, this was the Luke Skywalker we always wanted to see. And thank you, Jon Favreau, for giving that to us. Thank you. The wonderful gift. Fire Kathleen Kennedy. She has no idea what she's doing. Hire Jon Favreau. He knows what he's doing. Let's see. Yeah, you'll only watch it if B. Arthur is in it. That's your condition. You're sticking to it. Mandalorian? Well... no B. Arthur, although early in the first season they do make a reference to Life Day. Special was written by variety show people, no clue about Star Wars. Yeah, well, the entire deal with the Star Wars holiday special is that it's a variety show with Star Wars shoehorned in as some kind of thing. There's somebody who reacted to it recently, and there's 2 or 3 of them because it's a holiday special, right? So it's holidays, so they go, oh, I'll watch the Star Wars holiday special. Now there's a very good copy out of it out there on YouTube. And the reaction is very much like mine was when I first saw that, because I was 13. And of course, at that age, just the right age for Star Wars, it had come out like a year before, and you're all excited, cool, can't wait for this. And then you're just like, what the hell is this? The entire time. It's like, what is going on? Why is this happening? Why does Luke look so weird? Okay, this cartoon is better than the rest of it, but the animation's so weird. Han Solo's face looks like it goes halfway down his body, and you're like, what? It's just complete nightmare. But you're right, it was a variety special, and that's what it was intended to be, and it's terrible. It's terrible. I warn you in advance, if you're going to watch the thing, it's like hour 45. It's bad. It's not so good bad it's good. It's just bad. It's bad, and it's boring mostly. Yes, Larry, as you're saying, this Luke still leads to Jake Skywalker. Yes, that's true. That's absolutely true. But for the moment that he's there, you can put that in the back of your mind and say, finally, this is what we wanted to see, this character. Yes, it's true. It doesn't change anything. He's still going to go off and do the stupid things that Jar Jar Abrams and Ruin Johnson have him doing. But for this moment, finally, after all these years, we finally got to see the Luke Skywalker that we all wanted. To be fair, Marshall says, JJ's treatment of 8 and 9 was quite good. Luke was how you expected and guided Rey into the Jedi properly. My impression from watching the final movie, The Rise of Skywalker, was that Johnson, if you look at that, I reviewed it, I believe, but if you look at the structure of that thing, my impression was, and maybe you know more about it, Marshall, than I do, my impression was what Abrams had originally, I'm sorry, he's still Jar Jar Abrams. It's not just that. It's every damn thing he puts his fingers on turns into action schlock. He turned Star Trek into action schlock. And in Star Wars, I'm still not thrilled with, he took Rey, who was just, a Mary Sue from beginning to end, had no character growth to speak of. None of those characters really have much character growth, because he doesn't really understand that. This is a guy who you should never let write a script, or any of his buddies write a script. You come to him with a script and you say, this is an action movie, you shoot it that way. But my impression from watching that last movie was actually it was so fast-paced and so many things shoved in as retcons, that my impression was that he actually intended to make 2 movies. And the first movie would have been up to the point where Chewie died, or apparently died. I think that would have been the big climax of the second film if Jar Jar Abrams had done it. Rey shooting Force lightning up there, destroying the ship, and apparently killing Chewie. Oh my God, Chewie's dead. I can't believe it. Go to the credits. And then start in for the third movie after that. That was my impression. Could be wrong, but that was my impression. Oh, Darcy's player, you've watched that, yes. And nobody at this stage of the game, stir, whip, 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 stir, whip. Yeah. People don't get what necessarily what's going on there, by the way. People who watch that today don't get that. That was a bit of a satire of a cooking show run by a woman named Julia Childs. She was on PBS for years and years and years, had a cooking show. Everybody knew her name in 1978. And so that was kind of a satire of that. Just stupid and went on way too long. That's one of the things that is true with all of the acts in the Star Wars Holiday Special. They all go long, way too long. Everybody I've ever seen, and myself included, anybody I've seen reacting to it, they get to a certain point in a musical number or something, and it's like, oh God, when is this? How long is this going to go on? This is way too long. Not to mention, outright kind of creepy at times. Marcia says over half of 9 was retconning an adaptation to get out of 8's hole. The end was so rushed for that reason. Yeah, there was all that retconning, and I'm fairly certain that it was never Abrams' idea to kill Snoke and have the Emperor come back. My impression probably was that was a Hail Mary. You've killed off his main antagonist. Who can we get? Well, we could say the Emperor was behind it all, except that he'd been killed twice. Once when he fell down a giant shaft and apparently exploded, and everybody, by the way, who saw Return of the Jedi for the first time, assumed that giant wave of stuff coming out was just something, the dark side of the Force finally was freed from this man, and it was just massively shooting out. And then the Death Star exploded. Okay, how did he live? It is frankly the same problem I have with Boba Fett. Spoilers on this, by the way, for The Mandalorian. Boba Fett's getting his own series next year and has appeared in about half of the season of The Mandalorian. How did he survive? We saw him fall into a sarlacc's mouth where he would be slowly digested over 1,000 years. How did he live? I know that in novels and stuff they've had him come, and I assume that to some extent Jon Favreau is trying to keep up with that, but begs a big question. How are you not being slowly digested for 1,000 years? How did that happen? Jon Favreau should remake 8 and 9 as the non-director's cut. There have been ridiculous rumors lately that Disney is going to excise 7, 8, and 9 and make new ones. No. That is so dumb. No, that's not ever going to happen, because that would be an admission that they screwed up bad, and that would impact the value of that property, and it would impact Disney's shares. No, that's never going to happen. Those 3 movies are there forever, and that's all there is to it. Crap that they are, they're going to be there forever. So, anyway, that's my main thing about the Mandalorian season finale. I thought that was awesome. It was really, really good. The fact that we finally got to see the Luke Skywalker we always wanted to imagine came after, Return of the Jedi. Cool. Just very, very cool. Starseas Player says, in your mind, they are fake Star Wars. Yeah, I'm never going to watch them again. I mean, I see no reason to ever watch them again. It's not like the first film, 1977 film. There are 2 or 3 films that you can throw at me if you're going to say, hey, let's watch a movie. Let's watch Star Wars. I'm like, I'm with you there. Okay, where do I find a seat? We're good. If you throw me Superman from 1978, I'm there. I'm good. Where's the seat? Give me the popcorn. Same thing with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I'm there. You throw those movies at me anytime. You pull out Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and 9, and I'm like, nah. I'll just go off and watch something else someplace on my phone. You can watch this crap all you want. So, Marshall says even Sarlaccs have taste. He spit Boba right out. It's on the cutting room floor. Trust me on this. I'd have to see that one. I thought, either way, I thought Boba Fett died a bitch death. The character, it was fascinating because the character was built up in a way that he never, ever lived up to that potential. It's kind of why seeing him operate here now in this series and then him getting his own is kind of satisfying, because he first appeared in that Star Wars Holiday Special in the cartoon within that. And he was okay, although he was being oversold at that point too. But they oversold this character like mad. I mean, all kinds of different ways in terms of publicity and stuff for years. But before Empire, we were hearing about, there's going to be this bounty hunter. It's amazing. It's going to awesome friggin' bounty hunter. And then when they used him, well, he wasn't that amazing. He tracked the Millennium Falcon. He used the equipment given to him by someone else to freeze him and then take him away. And then he died a bitch death in episode 3, where they just, Boba Fett, where? Damn, dead. It did not live up to the potential and all the hype that we had. So seeing him doing something now that's kind of badass is nicely living up to the hype after 40 years. It's been 40 years since Empire. So finally living up to the hype. I like to see that as well. But The Mandalorian, great series so far. I don't care if people are complaining about it, how it's kind of formulaic. I don't mind the formula so much. But Luke, finally, after all these years, we finally got to see Luke done right. Yes, he'll still lead into Jake Skywalker, but he was still being done right here. This is before he got stupid. Boba Fett's accidental death was literally a burp joke. Yes, yeah. He just died a bitch death. I understand fans and stuff, and maybe authors outside of it, and stuff, bringing him back. It just doesn't make logical sense. So, all right. So that said, Mandalorian, awesome. Thank you, Jon Favreau. Disney, why does Kathleen Kennedy still have a job? Get rid of her. She is poison. Hire Jon Favreau. He understands this stuff. Okay. Other things that happened. Oh, God. Two of them really that are semi-related. Last night, Marshall, thank you so much, put me onto a video that was an interview with the guy who is supposedly heading up all of the research into the IT parts of what happened with some of these. Again, I have to be very careful because I don't know what YouTube will object to in my language, and I know that they can. The IT behind some of the machines that might have been used in some states for voting, and whether or not there were issues with those machines. Really? Jeremy Bullock, Boba Fett actor, died hours before Mandalorian finale? Wow, I didn't know that. Man. Huh. Well, sorry to see him go. Any case, this thing was on. It was an interview with a guy who is supposedly being in charge of doing the research into that to see if there was any shenanigans. Okay. At one point, I was saying, okay, my colleagues I will trust. And then I saw this guy, and I went, oh, he's untrustworthy. I've forgotten his whole name. It's Russell something. He's been on the press several times. But this one was just enraging because the guy, the best way I can describe it, was he was spewing technobabble at the interviewer. And yet I don't think he understood it was technobabble. He did not have the slightest comprehension of things like statistics. I barely have a comprehension of statistics. I got a B in my statistics class in college. I think I got a B rather than a C because my instructor was being nice to me. My daughter was born the day that I was going to have my final, so I took my final later. And I think probably he was grading me nicely to get a B. My understanding of statistics is generally pretty shaky, but his is even worse than mine. And he started talking about how all of these get this first right off the bat, he has never touched any of these machines. Okay, somebody's been doing this forever. If you're going to do a forensic analysis of something, you must have hands on it. You can't do it without having hands on it. And he was talking about how there's all these log files that had been deleted, and I'm like, where are the log files kept? Are they kept on the machines that you have not touched? If so, how do you know if they were deleted or not? You could walk through his whole thing. It was like an hour video of him just spewing nonsense. He reiterated something that we know isn't true, which was that the U.S. Army or somebody had seized some servers over it varies which story it is, whether it's in Germany or Spain. That's nonsense. The armed forces have repeatedly said that no such raid ever took place. And in any case, the data being sent, if there was data being sent out of those machines over to someplace overseas, how would you know, right? You don't have hands on the machine, so you can't see what's going on with it. You don't, in order to see the traffic moving from one place to another, you have to put what's called a packet sniffer on the network. And then you have to configure your network switches such that the packet sniffer can see all the packets on the network, right? You have to do it while the traffic is happening. So in order for that to work, you would have to put this packet sniffer, it would have had to have been on the wire the night of the election, right? They would have to have packet sniffers all over the place in all of these contested voting areas. Packet sniffers would have to be sitting there watching all of the traffic moving through. And I've done this a million times myself. I know how this works. You watch the traffic and you go, that's weird that it's going from, you're communicating from point A to point B. That's weird. But they didn't do that. They have no idea. You can't say with any level of certainty one way or the other. If it were me and I were setting up secure voting areas, it would be such that I would have firewalls in place, professional grade firewalls in place, so that even if something was connected to the internet for some reason, those firewalls would stop all kinds of traffic going in and out. I would certainly probably at least have test traces, packet sniffers sitting there watching some stuff, but I would do it all in advance in a laboratory, make sure it all works. And in any case, nothing from the outside world should be able to get through a firewall to those machines, even if they're connected to the internet, which most of them probably weren't. There would be no reason for them to be connected to the internet. Maybe a couple for tabulation in order to connect from one place to another, but interesting thing about it, when you look at the Senate testimony about this, the guy who was running this show said that those things might have modems in them, which means they're making a phone call, old school, very, very old school, 80s and 90s technology, a modem that makes phone calls. Well, you can't really intercept any traffic that may be going over those phone calls. It's one thing if you send it out on the public internet and you're stupid enough not to encrypt your traffic, which I would do if I was doing it. But if you're making phone calls, there's nothing to sniff there. It's a phone call. There's nothing in between there. Back when you had, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember AOL, but, they had a signature noise, that the modems would make on this phone call to connect them. If they're just calling each other, there's no traffic to sniff. And there's no way the Chinese nor anybody else is touching this. This was all complete BS. This guy should not be listened to. I now don't know if there's anyone who says that there's something going on with these machines that can be trusted. That said, I am morally certain that there were things going on in terms of this election you could call shenanigans on. I'm morally certain of it. I do not think that this is, I have to be careful about what I say for YouTube maybe to grab me. I think this election could have gone another way, and the reason it didn't is due to a number of factors. But this guy's a moron. Anybody who's telling you right now that there is some kind of... another thing I heard on the moron last night was the host who said that China had been printing a bunch of our ballots, millions of ballots for the U.S. And this guy said, yeah, nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. My uncle works for a printing company, or did, I think he's about to retire, or has retired. But my uncle works for a printing company in western South Dakota who has the contract to print the ballots for western South Dakota. Those ballots are not printed centrally. They're printed at thousands of printing companies all over the country who would get the contract to do it for their locality. They're not printed anywhere centrally, which is why there's no watermark on them. There's no watermark on any of these. That's nonsense. They're not printed in China. They're printed locally by local printing companies. And this guy was saying, saying, oh, yes, they were printed in. No, they weren't. They were printed in the state in which the votes occurred. The ballot adjudication. I'm unclear what to think about it, because the statistics I've seen about ballot adjudication come from people that I no longer trust. You're probably, I think you're a bit new here, Johnny Arcade, so let me give you a little bit of my background. I was in IT for 40 years. IT security is one of my specialties. So I've done a lot of this stuff. And when I hear these people talking now, they're all talking nonsense. So when you talk about that ballot adjudicating stuff, well, yeah, there's statistics involved with some of that I don't really understand, but it was clear from listening to this idiot last night that he understood even less than I do. But it's all coming from sources I can no longer trust. At one point, I would have said, yeah, I trust my colleagues implicitly, but after listening and seeing to now, I don't trust them. So when they say things about those ballots, they're saying things I can't trust. And there's no way for me to be able to evaluate it, because I'd need hands-on with one of those machines. I would need to stick it in a lab and run it, have a look at what's on it, run it through its paces, connect it up to the internet if it is, and fire up all of its programs and watch it on a packet sniffer to see what's going on and look at the log files. A million things. But I would need to have hands-on for it. And this guy last night had never had hands-on one, and he was making wild, ridiculous claims. You can't evaluate it if you don't have hands-on. When he says, oh, they wouldn't let us see it, well, okay, if they wouldn't let you see it, how the hell do you know anything? You must have hands on the equipment. There is no substitute for that. You got to have hands on. Marshall saying, I think the idea was that the Chinese ballots were fake ones to be pad the ballots. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't trust a damn thing that was said in that at all. And I think, I don't know for sure. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it. My uncle, I ran in 2004. I ran for South Dakota Commissioner of School and Public Lands. And my grandmother, who loved me very much, she had him, because they make up all kinds of extras. She had him pick up like 10 extra ballots and give them to her because it had my name on it. She was just so proud that, some member of her family might be getting public office. She didn't consider it sleazy like I do. But, they have extras all the time. They have all kinds of extras because you don't know for sure how many people are going to show up. Now, in terms of China doing something, he said it, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it because it's coming from sources that I can't trust. I know now for sure I can't trust these people. They're in my field, and I can't trust them. It's just that simple. Marshall says, having looked into the adjudication, and he has, yes, there is a major design flaw. The adjudicator can see the entire ballot, and they know how the adjudication will affect the outcome. They need blind adjudication. Yes, they shouldn't be able to see it. Yeah, exactly. Where all the adjudicator can see is the marked areas, no names associated with the marked areas, and the marked areas are randomly presented. That's blind adjudication. Yes, it's like anything scientific. It's like anything scientific. If you're doing a scientific test, testing a drug or vaccine, you don't want the researcher to know which people are getting the actual vaccine and which people are getting a placebo. Similar deal here. You don't want them to be able to see anything because that'll impact the adjudication. So that is a place where you could probably say there was some problems there, that there was a flaw. But all of this crap that you're hearing, nonsense. Total nonsense. This guy last night really ticked me off. Ticked me off to the point, in fact, where I sent an email to the reporter's head. It's a VP that would have been over this reporter. And I sent an email to him. I said, your reporter has just been snowed with technobabble. I explained what technobabble is, which is, sometimes, in my field anyway, the people I worked with, you're doing something difficult or weird, and you might come up with some statement like, yeah, the negative inverse flux multiplier needs to be channeled into inverse output Cat5 cable with a negative flux chiller on the end. Just total technobabble. What he was doing wasn't quite that bad. We sometimes also do it if we've got an end user who's maybe annoying, doesn't know what we're doing, and so we'll spew technobabble at them that they will never understand, and then go back and laugh about it with our friends behind our backs. But this guy was totally snowing her. I'm unclear that he even knew what he's doing, and he's the head of an information security firm. Maybe all that he's doing here is going out to interviews and stuff like this, because he's done more than one, and spewing out this nonsense in the hopes that it is free publicity for him, that he spews out the nonsense and some company's going to call him. It may be just as simple as that. I don't know. Hey, Jeanette, how you doing? What did I see that ticked me off? Yeah, there are anomalies. Again, I think that I have to be careful what I say, but I think this election could have gone a different way. I am morally certain that it should have gone a different way. The problem is that I personally can't prove it. And now I know, and this is what ticked me off, Jeanette, I was watching last night. Now I know that my colleagues who are supposedly looking into this are totally untrustworthy. I no longer trust anything that they say because of this video I watched last night that is supposedly from the lead researcher who's involved in this. And everything that he said was wrong. I think maybe there was a time or two where he said hypothetically. And when he put hypothetically in something, well, okay, it's not wrong. It's just really, really unlikely. Now, as to whether anything happened with those machines specifically, I don't know. I would have to have hands on the thing. And that's why everything he said fell apart. They've never had hands on them. If you can't touch the machines and get into them and see what's going on and go in depth, you have no idea. Looking from the outside, I can't tell. You tell me. You don't have hands on my laptop. You tell me, how is it configured? What software is on it? How does that software work? How does I do different things? Because my laptop's got some fairly specialized stuff on it for video production. If you don't have hands on, you will never know. Just as plain as that. It turns into nonsense. It turns into hypotheticals. It turns into craziness. And he was pushing conspiracy hypotheses because I don't think scientifically they would never rise to the level of a theory. He was pushing hypotheses that I know have been debunked repeatedly. And this was an interview he gave like 2 or 3 days before I watched it last night. Head of an information security company. And just spewing gibberish that I know from 40 years experience in this field was wrong. I can't trust them anymore. We don't know. The reality is we don't know much of anything about those voting machines. We just don't know because the people who are involved in doing this don't know. Not really. They're operating on hypotheticals and supposedlys. They talked about how they knew that data was being sent to China because some Microsoft engineer discovered it on the night of the election. And my initial and instant reaction was, what, did he put a packet sniffer on their network? How did he know this? Because without a packet sniffer on the network, how the hell would you know? And even then, okay, did they make sure that they had the port that they were plugging in? It is a little complicated. You connect computers together with what's called a switch. And most of the time, switch, I don't have one sitting here in front of me. A switch is a box that can vary. The small ones are like this big, ones that might fit in a rack and have, say, 24 jacks, network plug-in jacks. this thick, this wide, and then you get the really big ones, the heavy-duty ones that you use in big commercial enterprises, or really gigantic ones that are capable of all kinds of amazing things when you're an ISP or a backbone provider. I've seen them all. They're massive. Some are massive, some are tiny. But these days, they're configured out of the box so that the traffic coming from one machine is not visible to the traffic on the other. So to get a packet sniffer to work, you have to say, okay, I'm going to take one jack, where all of these computers are plugged into. I'm going to take one jack, and I'm going to configure it so they can see all of the traffic on this switch. So what? This Microsoft engineer had a packet sniffer plugged in to a switch that had this one port configured so that you could see all traffic. What? That's nuts. It's infuriatingly nuts. It's just crazy. It's all crazy. It doesn't have any basis in factual reality that I can find. Is there problems? Probably. I am morally certain that there were. Can we know what they are? Nope. My colleagues who are involved in this have proven themselves via their interviews to be totally untrustworthy. They do not know what they're talking about, and what data they give out, there is no basis for that I can see, because of how it would have to have been done. So there's that. And then there's the issue. One of my viewers sent me a link to a couple of videos that supposedly showed how Trump was going to come out on top of all this. It supposedly had a crap ton of information about it. One of them was an hour long and had links to other sites. And I've got one sitting up here in front of me. It's a Google Doc called Trump-Pence Path to Victory. Well, I have a difficulty with any of those kind of videos. I have a difficulty with it. It devolves down to I don't know how to evaluate it. Always, when looking at something in the press, whether it's traditional press or otherwise, and this was non-traditional, it was a YouTube channel run by a company, I have to put myself in what I always call fair witness mode, or at least try to. I'm not perfect, but I try. For those of my viewers who are new, those of you who are not, sorry, you're going to hear this again. A fair witness is a fictional profession that was invented by author Robert A. Heinlein and used in his book, A Stranger in a Strange Land. A professional witness is a fair witness is someone who is a trained observer. They see everything going on, and if you ask them about something that happened, they can give you details about what they saw. What they don't do, or feel, or taste, or touch, anything like that. What they don't do is make assumptions, right? So if you ask one, what color is the house across the street, their answer would be, it's white on this side. Now you could take them around across the street and walk them around all the way around the house, and each wall of the house might be white. But they don't make the assumption that the moment they turned their back from it, that wall didn't somehow spontaneously turn green. This is what I saw at a given point in time, and I made no assumptions about it. So when I watch those videos that were given to me, I cannot evaluate them because I put myself into fair witness mode, and all I see are people talking, people making claims, people who are unnamed, working with a real, altered voice modulator. Claims about showing us software and stuff that's on the screen that is out of context, so I can't tell if it's coming from one of these voting machines or if it's something that somebody made up. Maybe they didn't, but I can't tell. They showed a lot of footage of various things, but I couldn't tell if the footage had anything to do with what the voiceover was saying, because that's something you always have to watch at when you're looking at press stuff. How much is filler? How much is stock footage? And I couldn't evaluate it. There's no way to evaluate it because there is no documentation presented. There's talk about documentation, but I don't see it. I can't see this documentation. So I can't verify anything that this person was saying. I listened to them talk. I watched the thing. but I can't verify it. Every time I'm given a video like it's the same thing. It's the video reinforces the person's belief system. And the belief system is, A, that the election should have gone down another way, and that B, President Trump is playing the long game, and it's only a matter of time. Any minute now, all sorts of things are going to happen. He's going to be in office in January. If that's your belief system, then you're watching these videos, then you're going to go, yes, this is what's going on. This is exactly what's happening. But if you come at it like me and not have any emotional attachment to it, because that is not my belief system at all. I'll talk about that too in a minute. It's not my belief system at all. I don't care. So all I hear is somebody talking. All I see is somebody talking. And they're not being impartial. They're occasionally stopping, because this individual did. On the one that was given to me yesterday, the individual stopped to make editorial asides that were typically kind of snide. Well, that doesn't lend credence to you. You know, when you're going to do something like that, it should be like James O'Keefe, right? There's a guy who's got the footage. He's got the tapes. The guy's running an amazing series, by the way, on CNN and their morning briefings. If you haven't listened to those, do. But like James O'Keefe, tell us what the story is. Show us the footage. Show me the documentation. Show me the paper trail. Show me something that I can say, okay, this appears to be something that is legitimate, not something that is people claiming things and showing me videos that may not have anything to do with what they're saying, stopping for snide remarks, and not giving me any actual documentation. You get snippets 5 seconds long of a computer. Do we know that this isn't stock footage from somewhere? Do we know that this isn't just made up? Do we know that some programmer didn't just come up with a screen for them, that did what they wanted it to? We don't know this stuff. Maybe they're totally honest. Maybe they're not. I'm not making an assumption either way. All I can just say is I saw this video. To me, it's semantically null. It means nothing because I cannot verify anything. All I'm seeing and hearing is stuff that I can't in any way verify. But that concept of the mindset, the belief system, and this is where I'm going to lose I could lose some of my conservatives. For the last 4 years, we have been seeing the left going into what I dislike calling, but it's the popular term. It's not a good psychological term, but it's the popular term. Going into TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. They've gone crazy. It is largely a function of the big tech propaganda complex and the media propaganda complex being extraordinarily successful. But they went nuts. They literally mentally ill. I don't know what you call it, but if they went to a therapist, they would find that they have some mental illness. Maybe it's a kind of mass hysteria. I don't know. But it's a mental illness. Guys on the right, your belief system is leading you into something that my good friend Marshall Presnell last night gave me a term for, which is Trump fan derangement syndrome, TFDS. You guys are starting to lose it. Regardless of what went on in this election, I see zero path for President Trump to have a second term. All of the stuff that you hear, he's waiting a long game. He's any second now. Well, Rudy Giuliani just came out with another bombshell, press conference. Jesus, how long now? How long has Rudy Giuliani been coming out with bombshell press releases? Any second now, it's all going to be fixed. And that doofus woman who was going to release the Kraken. Well, there was no Kraken to release. It's your continued belief that this is going to happen at this stage of the game is some kind of Trump fan derangement syndrome. I need you to come back to reality. Please. I need you to come back to reality. Regardless of what went on in this election, and I don't think it was good, I think it bit the Republicans badly, and it bites all of us badly. But this is the way it is. I can't prove anything about anything because I've not had, like in my field of expertise, my hands on the machines. And the people who are supposedly in charge of these things have also not had hands on the machines. They can't prove anything. There is nothing you can take to court that says, I have evidence, this is rock solid evidence that this occurred, that a court can then rule on. It's why most of them, for a variety of reasons, said, no, we're not going to do this. You don't have standing. You can't prove squat. I'd like to be able to prove it. I really would. I'd love to be able to prove it. But I can't. I can't prove it. I have nothing to take before a judge to say that this was wrong. You guys are just going to have to cope. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to cope. Trump is not going to have a second term. I see no path for it. This notion that he would invoke the Insurrection Act over what? See, if he invokes the Insurrection Act, ultimately down the line, he's going to have to prove something. If you don't have the evidence and you invoke the Insurrection Act, I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens. I assume that you're impeached and kicked out. I mean, he's going to be leaving in January anyway, so I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens exactly, but it doesn't lead to a presidency. It doesn't lead to a presidency. If you're going to invoke the Insurrection Act, you have to have a reason to do it, and you have to be able to prove something in court with incontrovertible facts. And there simply are none. I wish there were, but there aren't. There just aren't. Starseed Slayer says, first time you saw TDS was that video of the vape store clerk. Oh, I don't even remember. It's been so long. Yes, and Starseed Player says that Trump has said he has no intention of the Insurrection Act. Because why? Why would he? What would be the basis? To next acting, so what happens if next week you get proof about those machines? Well, that's a whole different story. If we can have objective proof that a judge can look at and say, oh, yeah, there's a problem here. Okay, I'm entirely behind it. But if you don't have the proof, and for weeks since the election itself, we have constantly heard this refrain from Trump fans. Oh, he's going to fix it. He's going to fix it. About a week, this is going to happen, and it didn't happen. About another week, this is going to happen, and it didn't happen. Oh, another week, this is going to happen, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. You guys, you keep failing, okay? This is Trump fan derangement syndrome, TFDS. You're starting to disconnect from reality, and I need you to not do that. We do not want... It's bad enough that half the country suffers from a mental illness. We do not want the entire country suffering from it. To begin with, it's a great path to civil war. But beyond that, you don't want to be mentally ill, okay? You got to look at this and say, do I have proof? Do these claims make any sense? Giuliani's made yet another press conference, but he's made 5 of those already that went absolutely nowhere. What is the likelihood that this time they got a Hail Mary that's going to somehow fix it? You're going to have to say to yourself, okay, all right, this sucked. We need to figure out a way to make the next election somehow more secure. I don't know how you do that, honestly. I really don't. But we're going to have to figure that out. We're going to have to look to 2022, see if we can flip the House and keep the Senate. Going to have to wait until 2024, see if we can't get somebody who's electable in as the president. This is not going to turn out the way that you're thinking. It is Trump fan derangement syndrome, TFDS. Marshall gave me that term. Thank you, Marshall. I'm stealing it. TFDS. We're starting to see it. Please, for God's sake, come back to reality. Look at what has not happened. You have been holding out hope and holding out hope and holding out hope, and nothing ever comes of it. Every single time it's, oh, this new thing's going to happen. It's going to fix it all. And then it doesn't. It doesn't come to fruition. Oh, this new thing over here. This time he's got it. Nothing happens. You're ultimately, what is going to happen is that the joint session of Congress is going to ratify those electoral votes. That's what's going to happen. And rather than going out and starting a civil war over it, just come back and say, okay, got to work on this. Got to work on the future. Can't sit here and say, oh, if you do what the Democrats did, you're going to spend 4 years screaming out about, Biden. And don't worry, I'm going to have lots of things. I'm certain I'm going to have lots and lots of things to criticize him about. He is, after all, kowtowing to an extraordinary left movement inside of the Democratic Party. I have lots of negative things to say about him, don't get me wrong. But he got there. By hook or by crook, he did. Starseeds Player says, yes, people need to go from facts and reason. Yes. Danette says, I look at it that it's still possible because there's been no independent check of the machines. Why do I have to prove I'm right when no one has proved I'm wrong? Well, the thing is, there's not going to be an independent audit of those machines. There's just not going to be one. It is not going to happen. Now, you can hope for that until January 20th, but take it to the bank. It's not going to happen. I would be thrilled. God, send me one. I would love to have hands on those things. I would love to have one on a bench and be doing all kinds of testing with it. I'd like to do things like, first off, make an image of its hard drives and set those aside somewhere, 2 or 3 images, put one on, permanent storage and stick it in a safe deposit box so it's safe, and then start messing with the thing. But nobody has had hands on that, on the side that says they're bad. No one has hands on them. And that's not going to happen. The various courts have said no. Whether you like it or not, that's what they said. It's bad. It's unjust. It shouldn't happen. But that's what's happened. And I don't see that changing between now and January 20th. And I worry about people who have this issue thinking that every 5 minutes a new thing's going to come along and fix it. It's not. What are you going to do when he's sworn in, when Biden's sworn in? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Please don't go crazy. Starseeds Player says the introduction of those damned machines was sketchy from the start years ago. To me, the source code should be totally open on those. Oh, I'd be thrilled if they did nothing but open source, free and open source software, what we call FOSS in the IT world. That'd be awesome. If you could have the source code out there somewhere, GitHub, where anybody could drag it down and have a look at it, that would be awesome. But it's not. But you're absolutely right about the technology. We should never have gone any farther than Scantron machines. Go in there with a pencil or a pen, make your little mark in the hole, and hand them in for a Scantron machine to run. That's all we should ever have done. Making it any more complex than that creates attack vectors. I mention this oftentimes with respect to that unspecified virus of unknown origin. But attack vectors matter, right? And when you get anything that's complex technologically, you get more attack vectors. It's like why people like me exist. When we would, for example, setting up, because I've done a million of them, set up a server for some purpose, right? A computer server. Well, about the last thing you do, hopefully, before you put it out the door to be installed, you run a whole battery of security tests against it to see if you can find a way in. And they're automated and they're very complex, which is why they're automated. But you throw this, it's called penetration testing. You throw this pen testing at it, and if it fails, you send it back to the engineers. You say, guys, this is wrong, that's wrong, that wrong. Sometimes you have to send it back to programmers and say, you guys got to fix this code. But, you'd want to pen test the thing. And we've not got the ability to pen test it. It should be open source. That would be the best thing. That would be the second best thing. The best thing would be to throw them all into a dumpster, wipe the hard drives and give them to a junior college or something, and go to Scantron cards. Nothing more technologically complex than Scantron cards. The attack vectors are much lower. There are very few with that. Similarly, when we get to mail-in voting, there are too many attack vectors. That shouldn't happen. Just shouldn't happen. There are too many attack vectors with mail-in voting. Jeanette says, if there's no audit, then I can believe the evidence is there. That does not make me crazy. It makes me a person with convictions. Well, if there's no audit, something might be there. It's possible, but we don't know. I always tend to come back to myself, because I worked in a field constantly where you constantly are asking questions about something. Is this working right? Can we do this better? What's the best way to do this sort of thing? And so when I look at this, I go, well, could there be problems? Yes. Can I prove it without actually ever touching one of these machines? No, I can't prove it. I'm morally certain that there's problems with it. I'm morally certain of that. But I have to be a scientist. I have to step back and say, okay, can I prove any of this? No, because I'm not in the loop. I'm not in the loop, and nobody is. So you can choose to believe that it's there. I can't, because I'm too much of a scientist. I have to go, well, it could be, but I can't prove it. I haven't seen it, don't know anything about it. And neither does anybody else. So you can believe it's there if you want to, but if you're going to believe that, use it as an impetus to go forward, right? Say, okay, this was bad. This shouldn't happen this way. We need to change the way voting's done. Take it back to Scantron cards. That's what we need to do. How can we make that happen? Not go, Trump was stolen, the election was stolen, and I'm really pissed off about that, and we got to do something. Let's, like people are doing, let's go out there, the 6th, I think, of January. There's supposed to be some giant rally, and they're all going to, President Trump himself is fueling this whole thing by going on with it, and he's got, a base that is very, very passionate about it, and I worry about that. I worry about that because if you're going to continue to do that, even after he's in office, he's not my president. Well, the left said that the last time. By the way, no president is your president. I will never have a my president. The president is not a king. The president is a guy that I elected to run the executive branch. He is not my president. He is some guy that got elected. That's our the whole notion of treating it as, he's my president. No, he's not. He's a guy that you hired to run something. I can't ever get behind anybody who ever says, he's my president, and if you don't say he's your president too, then you're some kind of traitor. Like, no, he's not my president. He's some guy that I hired to do a job. So, but if you're going to say, do exactly what the left did for the next X number of years, which is say, Biden's not my president. He wasn't elected fairly. Well, okay, but you got to figure out to yourself, say, okay, how can we get the election to be fair? How can we get it so that we can be certain that next time around this election was fair? How do we get to that point? Not sit back and go, not my president. It was totally stolen. I see a path to civil war that direction. But you need to just go, okay, here's what we need to do in the future. I'm pretty sure that this happened with those machines. We need to stop that. How do we stop that from happening in the future? Let's see. Marshall says, on any system similar to our election systems, the only proof that a vote was cast should be the full and complete event log or audit trail. Yes. That was another thing this guy I saw last night was talking about, was all these logs that they'd been deleted. And I'm like, how do you know that? If you haven't had hands on anything, where were the logs kept? Where were they deleted from? How can you make that statement without having actually been able to investigate it, which they haven't? Maybe that stuff happened, but it's total rumor. There's no way at all to validate that. You can't say that happened. Maybe, but we don't know because nobody's ever been in the things. Marshall says you could forward hash the current log entry with the previous entry's forward hash, for example. He's talking about a technical thing that you could do there that makes it very, very statistically almost impossible. that you'd get the same hash for various things. But that's something you could do that would make it better, yes. Jeanette says, doesn't that mean I'll freak out if Biden does become president? I can still be a person of convictions and live through a Biden and Harris presidency. Yeah, again, I'm going to have lots of negative things to say about him. I know I will. And just watch my scrolling lower third. These guys are going to kowtow to some of the leftist demands. And conceivably, they could kill as many as 15% of the human population, including Americans. We're going to have to be very against almost everything he does. The best thing we can hope for. And this is true of almost all presidents, regardless of whether they're Republican or not. The best thing you can hope for is gridlock, where nothing moves. Nothing at all moves. But some of the people I've seen, there's this undertone of exactly the same sort of TDS we've seen, but it's with rabid Trump fans, rabid supporters who, every day on social media, I'm seeing a new conspiracy hypothesis about how Trump's going to pull it out. Just wait next week. Oh, God, next week. Next week, the fun really begins. Really? You said that last week and the week before and the week before and the week before. What are you going to do when this guy is when Biden's sworn in? What are you going to do? I'm not worried about you, Jeanette, but I am worried about a lot of these idiots that I see on social media. Now, it may just be that they're keyboard warriors. I hope so. But it may not. I don't know. Marshall says you not only could tell that the log was tampered with, but exactly precisely where the validity ends. Yes, if you implement those security measures that Marshall is talking about. We don't know if they were implemented or not. The one thing that always, one of the reasons I worry about these machines, even without having hands-on with it, is because in my experience, unless you're getting up to Department of Defense military stuff that I've not touched. I have a brother-in-law who touches them routinely. Can't talk about it at all. The only thing that we've ever talked about is when you're doing any kind of work with this on a large enough system, you have to have a change control procedure in order to do it. The larger you have a company, then the more complex the change control committee and stuff is required to do things. And he's told me that military has something very similar to that, and that it's actually even worse, more stringent than if you're going through one in the private sector. And he's done both. That's all he can talk about. He can't tell me anything about what he's doing, and I wouldn't ask. But except when you get into things like military systems, my experience is that government IT systems suck. They are at least 20 years behind the current technology in many, many cases. I have seen that over and over and over. The problem is real simple. Anyone who's good in IT can make a ton of cash in the private sector. You really can. It's a very good field to get into if you have the aptitude and you want to get money. It's good. It's not attorney money. Most of the time, you can be really brilliant and make a crap ton of cash. Marshall, I'm looking at you. But for the most part, if you've got aptitude and, even if you're average at your job, you're still going to make a pretty good living. What happens is the crappier you get, the less aptitude and talent that you have, the less the private sector wants you. And you don't earn nearly as much working for the government. It's a fraction working for the government. If you're somebody in IT, and I'm sorry for those guys who are, but if you're in IT working in government, there's a good chance that you are untalented, that you will make mistakes, that you'll do the wrong thing, that you will leave open security holes that I would not leave open. So when you get on that level, you're dealing with a government that does not understand technology, that generally has people that are inferior in terms of their talent, in terms of their abilities. Then you get crap. And it could very well be something that would be a problem with these machines. But I don't know. I have never seen them. I've never seen the networks on which they rested. I've never seen precisely it is how the tabulation machines in any given local election place would then forward up to a larger system. I don't know anything about it. We've never seen it. I can imagine quite a lot because I've seen a lot of government IT crap over the years. I hated working with the government. I did on a number of occasions. Hated working for it because what would happen is you'd get in a problem. They'd bring you something. You'd go, I haven't seen this in like 15 years. You guys are way behind. I hate working for them because of that, because you're limited by what they've got, their limitations. And you can't mess with it too much because then you're going beyond the bounds of what the guy who works for them is capable of doing. So I can imagine that being a problem with this. Problem is, I can't prove it. I can easily imagine it, but I can't prove it. Let's see. Larry says, Republicans need to cheat as good as Democrats. Yeah, that's the problem, and I've said it. I've said it repeatedly on the show. Whatever happened here, and a big part of it, is the big tech propaganda complex and the media propaganda complex. It's a big, big part of it. But whatever went on here worked for the Democrats. If there was issues going on with all of these many attack vectors that I can know about and imagine, then what needs to happen next time, because the Democrats are not going to change those laws. They have the House, they have the presidency, whatever's going on there with, mail-in ballots, they're not going to change because it worked for them. So what Republicans need to do starting in 2022 is take advantage of the exact same attack vectors. Once you have hurt the Democratic Party, then they'll want to change the law. As long as it keeps working for them, they won't. Admittedly, what I've just suggested is illegal. So, I'm not saying, that look, Republican Party, go out and break the law. What I'm saying is there's lots of attack vectors to think about. And the way to get the law changed is to hurt the people that are currently benefiting from it. So, in terms of needing to cheat, yeah, I see that really as the only option if you want to get the law changed, because they're not going to change it. Marshall says we need to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to cheat on a major scale, say more than 0.1% of the vote. Yeah, totally agreement with you there. Marshall also says the voting system should be at least as secure as the credit card data security standards, PCI DS2, those are industry technology stuff, and maybe even 2 NEST certificates, certification standards. Yeah, that's another piece of security stuff that Marshall's talking about. It's too complex to get into. Yeah, and they don't have it. They just don't have it. I mean, I can imagine many, many attack vectors. I don't know if they were used. I can't prove that. Morally certain they were, but without having hands-on, I can't tell. But Marshall, unfortunately, what you're talking about there, you probably know as well as I do. Getting a government IT to do that, what are the odds? 1,000,000 to 1? Like I say, those guys generally aren't that hot. And explaining the concepts that you just have to them, probably whoosh, complete whoosh over the head. I don't know how if you were doing it, if you and I were doing this, if we sat down to work out the perfect electronic voting system, we could do it. We could do it. It would be perfect. Nobody would ever be able to get through, or if they were, it would be such a bizarre and event that it would, I guess you say, less than 0.1% of the vote. If you and I did that, we'd have it. We'd have it. But not these dimwits. They just, okay, we need voting machines. Here's an RFP, request for pricing, which you always get from governments. And then you get back a bunch of stuff from different people who make those. And dimwits who don't know what they're doing because their lawyers look at this and go, this one's cheap, let's do that. And that's what you get. Jeanette says, my concern is that the next elections will be run with socialists in charge. They can easily make decisions and laws that will skew the conditions to one side, the election to one side. Yeah, Here's the thing. This is one of those reasons that I don't necessarily think that this, what they talk about is the Great Reset or stuff like that. I don't think any of it's going to work. The 20th century is honestly literally a textbook of how communism and socialism always fail, killing millions in the process. Any kind of global governance will kill billions in the process. Okay, Americans appear to have become complete wusses. There's no question about that in my mind. But if you're dying because they've gone to the Green New Deal and we've crippled American agriculture and you're starving to death, well, you know, politicians tend to respond to their voters starving. And if they don't, starving voters are not going to vote for you again. Communism and socialism always fail. So even if a socialist gets into power, it's only a matter of time. It may be next year, might be 10 years down the road, which would be horrible, and all those policies would be terrible. But eventually, it will collapse. There just is no other option. Look at the 20th century, the entire century. Every single time they tried it in a major way in any country, it collapsed. You know, Venezuela, 10 or 15 years ago, richest country in South America, went socialist, 10 years, less than 10 years, down the toilet. Eventually it fails. It fails. And you can come back from the ashes when that happens. I again, you know, if it was up to me, I would limit the technology on voting solely to Scantron cards. And I would eliminate mail-in voting completely. But yeah, I think it's quite possible the next elections will be made with socialists in charge, and they'll make decisions that will be bad. But socialism ultimately fails. It always ultimately fails. Just aren't any exceptions. You can't point to anywhere in the world where communism and socialism worked. You know, and the people who are coming up now, I know because I've had a few of them talk on the show, people who are younger people, millennials, post-millennials, they think this whole socialism thing is a new idea. You know, that as long as, you know, my generation and later will just get the hell out of the way, they'll create a perfect socialist utopia. Well, it's not going to work out that way. They're going to have reality smack them in the face. If they do the Green New Deal, they're going to have it smack them in the face in the form of there being less groceries on the grocery store shelves. But it won't work. Ultimately, it is self-correcting. I hate to say that. I don't want it to be self-correcting because that's going to involve a lot of death. But it is ultimately self-correcting. Ultimately, it cannot stand. It will always fail. And if they tried it on a global level, it would fail catastrophically. It's not fun to live through. It would be terrible. You might well starve. But ultimately, it collapses. There just isn't any other way that it turns out. Don't want to see it. I will spend, as I suspect, because I don't see any reason anyway for Trump to get sworn in, I will spend the next 4 years screaming about Joe Biden because all of his policies will be bad. They'll take the situation that we're in right now and make it worse. The biggest danger that I see right now coming into it is that he has promised things like nationwide lockdowns, nationwide masks. Look at the stats for my county, okay? We don't need all of that. We have never needed it. If you do the draconian things that he wants to do right now, it's going to cause more harm and suffering here in Lancaster County, Nebraska, in Lincoln, Nebraska. We don't need this crap. He's going to make it worse. And I will scream at the top of my lungs about how he's making it worse because I know he will. Anytime you slide towards socialism, you're sliding towards collapse. You're sliding towards people dying of starvation because that tends to be what happens. It's self-correcting, not in a good way, but it ultimately is self-correcting. Jeanette says if it collapses America, the Constitution will be trashed. We'll never get it back. Possibly. But the thing about it is, when you have socialism fail on a major scale, things change afterwards that move you away from it. Now, I have to tell you, Jeanette, the Constitution is already trashed. It's already meaningless. It really is. Totally meaningless. The Constitution was killed by Abraham Lincoln. He freed the slaves, and that is a good thing. That was a great thing. But in the process, he took what had been a bunch of independent nations and created a giant country out of it that was centrally managed in Washington, D.C. He killed the Constitution. He violated it constantly. He killed the Constitution. Fast forward a bit, FDR, well, he was just pounding the final nails in the Constitution's coffin. Every single politician since him, every president since him, has been pissing on its grave. The Constitution right now is irrelevant. It is relevant only in certain portions. But I say it all the time, 99.9999 9999% of the time of anyone in Washington is taken up abusing and destroying the Constitution. They don't want to uphold their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. They want to destroy it. And really, they don't have to anymore. It's dead. The Constitution is dead. It is almost meaningless. You know, if it weren't, we wouldn't be in this situation. If they upheld their oaths to support and defend, protect and defend the Constitution, we wouldn't be in this problem. It is now just a piece of paper that lip service is occasionally thrown to. And it's thrown to by either side, depending on how they think they can get the other. All we have are just power-mad, sociopathic narcissists running in a government whose constitution barely matters anymore. It is essentially dead, and it has been all my life. Let's see. Hey, Drop of Truth, nice to see you in here tonight. Glad you could come in. Marcia says you're looking at New Zealand, Denmark, Sweden. I haven't done any research, so I don't know about those. Merry Christmas, Drop of Truth. Even though it's Boxing Day there in Australia. Yes, you're a bit ahead of us. Drop of Truth says, don't look at New Zealand. It's built on a major fault line from its northern tip to its southern port. Oh, okay. Yeah, there are small problems. I have not looked. Last week, I think I mentioned that one of my viewers has and thinks Belize is a good choice. I don't know. I don't know how much I'll research it because there are personal issues that prevent me from escaping right now, which is now is a good time to escape. Said so last week. Time to flee the U.S. It ain't going to get any better from here. And when the collapse comes and people start dying, even if you're in a foreign country, I mean, we feed 1 billion people. So you decimate our agricultural output with the Green New Deal, and people, 1 billion or so worldwide, are going to die. It's just that simple. Drop of 2 says, go to the YouTube channel Justiceness and see what you mean. Okay. New Zealand also has a rabid leftist government. Yeah, I've not checked. I'd take your word for it. You're much closer to it than I am. Telling me what the Aussies think of the Kiwis. So, but you know, ultimately, it's self-correcting in a negative way, and I think what you wind up with is it's cruel. I would hope it doesn't have to happen, but if you had enough people die, then it might convince them that, in fact, the Constitution with limited government, and I mean really limited government, as laid out in the Constitution, is the right way to go. The survivors, the survivors of famine, of armed conflict, which would happen, the survivors of all that, the ones who live, may have learned a good lesson that would last for generations in this country. That large centralized government that controls every aspect of your life, because they do. That's how useless the Constitution has become. You cannot point to anything in your life that is not at some point regulated by government. See this phone? Regulated. See my computer? I can't see my computer? Regulated. The TV I'm looking at? Regulated. That I've got a Christmas tree over to the side? Regulated. I have my insurance from Geico. I saved money with Geico. Regulated. My car, regulated. My rent, regulated. The size and square foot of my house, regulated. My apartment, regulated. Everything. There is not a single thing that you can look at that is not in some way regulated by government, often totally unconstitutionally. Doesn't matter, because they don't. Let me see what Drop of Truth says here real quick. Starseed Player says, you want to see how well socialism is working? Portland used to be a nice city. Now it looks like a third world city. Yeah. Jacinda Ardern, and their prime minister, was educated via a Freemasonic scholarship and is an order of the Eastern Star Witch. She's also allegedly transgender. Send me a video to confirm it. I'd be curious to see. Sure. Yeah. The real problems here, the real issues are that the biggest issue is the one that's always near and dear to my heart. We are no longer teaching students anything. They walk out of high school and have for some time without an ability to read or write or even perform basic math. And that is not hyperbole. I taught them. I know that they're not being taught these things. Every Bill of Rights Day, I used to hand out to my students the 10th Amendment. I wouldn't, go on about it. I was an IT instructor, didn't think it was my place. But in labs, on a couple of occasions, I'd have conversations with people. And one guy I'll never forget, I explained to him, well, what the Constitution says is you can do this, this, and this. But that's all. And the 10th Amendment says everything else we leave to the states or the people. And he looked at me dumbfounded. And he said, it actually says that? Because he couldn't read it. He'd never been taught it in school like I was. And my parents were even better. My generation was less educated than my parents' generation, which were less educated than the prior generation. It has been a long, slow decline into outright illiteracy, where we now have teachers who know nothing, and so they can't teach anything to anyone. That is one of the biggest problems, is we have allowed our educational system to become non-educational. If you actually succeed there, it is because you're either incredibly bright or because you figured out a way to succeed in spite of the system rather than because of it. And worse, in its place, we have put in 12 years worth of compulsory communist and socialist indoctrination. I know that's what's happening because I taught them, and frankly, I can see some of what my own kids brought home. They're adults now, but I can see it in some of their attitudes. They weren't taught this stuff. Now, add to that a media propaganda complex, which we have. Used to be, it was just a military-industrial complex. No, this is a media propaganda complex that does nothing but propagandize for socialism. And then you have our big tech propaganda complex that last week, when I started mentioning an unspecified virus of unknown origin by name too many times, it paused my live stream. I figured out right then it was pausing my live stream because I kept talking about it. And then just yesterday, I had added a little bit of ad copy and put it up onto Twitter. And because of the nature of the words that I used, Twitter would not allow me to post it. That's where we're at. And unfortunately, those guys are never going to change. Those particularly, if I tried to get an appointment with my Congressman Ben Sass, who's on the on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, U.S. Senate, wouldn't take a meeting with me. And I talked briefly to one of his flunkies. His flunkies doesn't understand. These guys don't understand the technology. They don't understand what they're up against with particularly the big tech industrial complex, propaganda complex. They don't understand, and they will never be made to understand. It is a perfect storm of a number of different things that happened all simultaneously that turned newer generations that are coming up socialists and uneducated, totally uneducated. Not stupid, because a lot of them are very bright, just uneducated. They don't know history. They don't know what we used to call civics, Constitution, things like that. They don't know any of this stuff. They've never been taught it. They can't even read. They can't do math without 10 fingers. It's just that bad. So between all of these things, we have a problem where we're going to head towards socialism. And I don't see any way out of it in the long term, because we're not going to start teaching these people anymore. It's not like the best thing, if you're a parent, you could do is homeschool. I mean, even if you're one of the generations that's illiterate, you can still homeschool by staying one step ahead of your kid. If you have to learn to read, and so that you can teach your kid to read 5 chapters ahead, and learn to read that way. If you need to teach them, American history, and you don't know anything about it, read 3 chapters in a good textbook ahead. You can learn yourself. You are not incapable of teaching your own children. But if you allow the existing educational system that we've got to do it, then they're going to continue to produce illiterate ignoramai who are socialists. But we have all these things. It's kind of a perfect storm, and I just don't see long-term how it works out very well. Interestingly enough, Rush Limbaugh, who sadly has stage 3 colon cancer, some kind of stage 3 cancer, and is going to pass away soon. He recently had his last broadcast, and then had an interview in which he said he thought that he had failed. He's right. 30 plus years in broadcasting, where did it get us? Illiterate ignoramai who are socialists. He didn't actually have that much of an impact. When you look at it, and it's not his fault, he tried. But you're dealing with an educational system that doesn't educate, it indoctrinates, and you're dealing with people who are socialists and communists by 12 years worth of indoctrination. How do you fight that? One man can't. Doesn't matter how hard you scream. I certainly can't. I got useful things to say about it, but I got 6 concurrent viewers at the moment, and you're all my regular audience. Thank you. You guys are awesome. I always quote Harlan Ellison. I may have a small audience, but it's an intelligent one. But a big perfect storm of things happening to turn the country socialist. They'll learn their lesson, but it probably won't be pleasant for anybody. Let's see, you sent it to my Twitter. Thank you very much. I'll take a look at it after the show. 2 video links account. Okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine. I'll look at it. The Duchovny channel looks interesting. Cool. Students with smartphones haven't been given the opportunity to develop their cognitive skills or memory. They use their smartphones, Google search, and Wikipedia instead. That's true. For me, not Google anymore, but DuckDuckGo.com, because Google is horrible in terms of security and what they're tracking and learning about you. But DuckDuckGo.com has always been, I used to tell my students when I was teaching them, Google is the other half of your brain. You'll learn stuff from me. But then you get out in the real world and you run into a real world problem that's a real brain teaser. You just can't, what the hell? Well, Google it. Hopefully, and very likely, somebody else out there has already seen this problem and has come up with a solution that you can then walk through for yourself. If not, you get to be the one who does it. Please go out and post what happened for the next WhatsApp. But you do have to come at it with a fair amount of, general knowledge about what you're looking for in the first place. I don't think, however, that in general it's the technology. It's a great article. Reference it from time to time on the show by Robert Heinlein. It's a nonfiction piece called The Happy Days Ahead. I'll link to it when I'm done here below. He makes out the case that's absolutely rock solid about how we got to where we are. And it's real simple. I've said it before. 100 years ago, a teacher needed to know this much in order to teach in a one-room schoolhouse because they had so many different students at so many different levels. Then the next generation said, there's really no reason to have things like Latin in the curriculum. Let me tell you, if you don't have Latin, if you don't know why you need Latin, then you have a problem. Latin isn't oftentimes the language of many sciences. So then the next generation of teachers only knew this much. And then they took stuff out of the curriculum, so the next generation of teachers only knew this much. And they took stuff out of the curriculum, next generation only knew this much. And finally, we're here where our teachers' knowledge level is somewhere close to dinosaur bones. It's not the technology, it's that the teachers know nothing. We really are at a point now where it is the illiterates trying to teach the illiterates. It's just that bad. It's why you should do nothing but homeschool. Take your kid out. There's all kinds of resources. There are homeschooling resources on the web that you can go to. There are oftentimes local homeschoolers that will do things like if a parent has a particular talent for something, you can send all of your kids to that parent's house to play. Well, where they will then learn this thing that the parent knows. Sometimes they do, in fact, have regular tutors that can come in. Don't put your kid in a public school or even a private one. I don't think that they're immune anymore either. Homeschool. It's the only way to go. But most people won't do that. They'll continue sending their kid to be indoctrinated. Starseeds Player says, you got to go now. Good night. Okay, awesome. See ya. And I'm sure we're saying, thanks, Jeanette, or whomever you're talking to was right. So, let me look here. It's about 11:20. Drop of Truth says, a man may truly live in his dreams, his noblest dreams, but only if he is worthy of those dreams. Harlan Ellison. Yeah, Harlan was a great guy. Short, opinionated, occasionally a big jerk, but often right. That's why you had to put up with him. He was generally right. And he was a friend of yours. By God, he was a friend for life. If he got pissed at you like he did with Gene Roddenberry, he would hate you to his grave. Anyhow, I tell you, as I mentioned, I have a lot of family here today. And did a lot of fun stuff, not the least of which was the studio here. It's actually a small apartment, but because it's at my mother's house, we had a lot of family coming, and the tree is literally right next to me over here. So we had a lot of family coming, and so I had to do a lot of cleaning. I'm a bachelor, and I keep house like one, a male bachelor. So I had to do a lot of cleaning, which kind of messed up my back. And then today, of course, just doing holiday-related things kind of messed up my back. So it's about 11:20 or so where I'm at, and I think I'm probably going to let it go for the night, just because I can feel my back starting to hurt, even though I've got a big pillow behind it. Drop of Two says, you went to your folks for Christmas. Cool. Prawn cocktails, roast pork, gravy, and veggies, and then a trifle. Yum. Oh, if only I could eat most of that stuff. As it was, I was pushing my luck on a number of things, but it doesn't seem to have impacted my blood sugar, thank goodness. So I guess that is really all I've got to say about that for tonight. I would love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks, and I'll do my best to respond to you. So thanks for watching, and that is all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and God bless us, everyone. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.